I want to offer my welcome this morning to everyone and my thanks for spending a little time hearing a report, an update about the state of the school and how things are going on this end of October day. My name's Tim Richards. For those of you whom I have not had the pleasure to meet, I'm in my 10th year at Pomfret as head of school. It's certainly been an interesting year to be a head of school. But there's a lot of really good things to share, and I hope to share that over the next half an hour or so. Gary Dow is my sort of Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, and he will be advancing the slides in the deck as we go along. So if you hear me crying out "next slide," that's my good friend and Director of Communications, Gary Dow, at work. I want to start by acknowledging that the success of this year has been a total team effort. Certainly the administrative team, the faculty and the staff, but the students as well. And you see in this first slide, our student body president, Michaela Subiga, and her able vice president, Jackson Partilla. And they are just two of the students who have been great partners this year in helping Pomfret have such a good start. And I'm grateful to Michaela and to Jackson for their leadership in helping steward their peers through a really complicated time. Next slide. So this was last year, and it fall, our weekend in the fall for families is historically this wonderful reunion time, one of my favorite times of the year. Certainly one of my favorite events of the year. It's a great opportunity to connect with families and have you spend some time with your kids, but also meet teachers and advisors, coaches, and dorm parents. I do hope in a really modified way that you are taking advantage of the weekend and that you have been able to connect with advisors and with teachers, and for those of you who are parents to seniors, connecting with college counselors at this really important time. So we'll be talking a little bit this morning about what's going on now, and then we'll also focus a little bit on what we're planning for the second half of the school year. And then I hope that we'll have an opportunity to take some of your questions. I do have the full senior admin team is on as panelists with me, and they stand ready to answer questions that you may have. So next slide. So it was certainly an unexpected spring. COVID took us by surprise, though we sort of felt it coming. Its severity and its growing edges hit all of us in schools and hit all of us in every organization across the country, in every industry. It was a tumultuous experience for people here at Pomfret, but it was a tumultuous experience for everyone. We learned a tremendous amount along the way, as we anticipated we would, and we had a plan for the spring and we executed the plan. Things went pretty well, but we also knew that as the spring advanced, that there was a likelihood, or strong possibility anyway, that our learning would be somewhat disrupted and our program would be slightly disrupted for the fall. So as we made our way through the spring and ended the school year, we did so as we transitioned, even as we finished the one school year, we were transitioning our thinking and our planning for what we knew was going to be a potentially very uncertain fall. So this summer, next slide, the summer was a summer of extraordinary planning, and I cannot give enough credit to the members of my senior administrative team, to the members of the faculty, and I'm not going to spend too much time rehashing that process, but it was an extraordinary process, and the work that the folks at Pomfret did to get ready for this school year was amazing. And I can't pay high enough compliments to the people at this school who prepared themselves for classes and for the residential side of life the way we did, so that we would be ready when students returned. We developed a plan that we believed was really solid, but one that we knew inevitably and invariably would be modified along the way. And we have been modifying in many different ways along the way since we returned at the end of August and beginning of September. So more on that to come. Next slide. It was also a summer for speaking out. We were challenged by our students, by our alumni, by our trustees, to turn our attention again to the national and even the global dialogue around social justice and racial equality. And we spent a great deal of time this summer in parallel universes, focusing on the reopening plan, but also the work that we had to do as an institution to support specifically our BIPOC, that's our Black, Indigenous, people of color, students, faculty, and alums. And so we remain, and we said this summer, we remain committed to doing our part. And a little bit later in this presentation, I'll share some of the terrific work that we've been doing so far this year under the really, really able leadership of Jillian Forg and T.C. Hanmer, who are co-directors of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion this year at Pomfret. So next slide. We were able to have a successful reopening. We opened as a school of 350 students. And back in March and April and May, when COVID was arriving, I think there was some concern, not just at Pomfret, but at schools and colleges across the country about what enrollment would look like. I think you as parents and some number of other families, both at Pomfret and other schools, saw the benefits of being at a school that was going to be open when that was an uncertainty at many places. So we opened with 350 students, a full school. About 80 of those students began the year as distance learners. And we've had a few more who have gone to distance learning for a number of personal reasons. Some seniors wanted to go and visit colleges. Some students chose to participate in athletic endeavors. And in doing so, they were forced into our distance learning model. This past Sunday, last Sunday, we welcomed back 23 of our distance learners. So we are a more full campus this week than we have been all fall. And it's been a delight to welcome those 23 students back, to see behind their masks, their smiling faces, and to add to the great community and campus feel that we have going on. We did open campus in September with new restrictions and new policies, all designed to keep our students and our faculty and staff safe. And it gave the campus something of a different feel. I'll say, and this is one person's opinion, that two months into that, the reopening, things still don't feel normal, but they feel we're getting used to the abnormality, and we're growing accustomed to what it's like to teach and to learn and to commune in a place that historically is so relationship centered, such a healthy place for close relationships. And it's really, really hard when we can't be close. We can't express in our smiles and with our hugs and with our handshakes our appreciation for everyone in the community. So it's been a challenge, but we're 2 months in and things are going well. So next slide. I've always been a big fan of Gary Larson and The Far Side. And this cartoon, I think at some very real levels, depicts what people are feeling about 2020. Though, I would say that in a lot of different ways, our own version of an ice cream truck has been a very different and a much tastier ice cream truck than a liver and onions truck. I say that even as I acknowledge that life isn't perfect on campus. I say that even as I acknowledge that yesterday, I sent out a letter that raised some concerns amongst members of our community, parents and students alike, where we had to take a step backwards in terms of our opening, in terms of some of our restrictions. And I know that was not easy news for people, but I think we believe strongly that it was prudent. COVID is real, and we're in the midst of a second wave. And that wave is beginning to lap at the shores of Pomfret School. And so we are trying to be as thoughtful and as prudent as we can. So there may be liver and onion trucks out there in different neighborhoods, but we feel kind of like a Baskin Robbins of ice cream trucks around here, lots of different and really tasty flavors. So we again, as I said yesterday, and as I just mentioned, we did have to take a little bit of a step back. Last night there was a student forum, and I was invited to attend, at least it was an online forum, attend that. And I did briefly because I wanted the students to have a chance to speak freely without the fear that the head of school was watching over them. And I reinforced to the group of students that at Pomfret, we make choices, and specifically I make choices in the name of doing things right, to do the right thing, not the easy or the popular thing. That's not what our role as adults in this community are. And I paraphrased an old favorite song of mine from the legendary Bob Marley. And I said, you can please some people some of the time, but you can't please all of the people all of the time. And so when these rollbacks that we sent out yesterday, and which we communicated yesterday, were not met with uniform approval nor disapproval, we recognize that making decisions, you're going to have some people who fell on one side and others who fall on the other side. And we will continue to monitor our situation. We'll continue to make decisions that are in the best interest of the safety and health and well-being of all members of our community. The new and heightened COVID numbers in our area present a challenge, but we believe that we are well equipped to face those challenges, and we believe that we're taking the right measures at this point. So next slide. So what's good? And as I said, so much is good, even with the cases that the uptick in cases that we've seen locally. Next slide. There is reason to celebrate, and ample reason to celebrate. Despite the rising cases, both nationally and locally, we still have not had a single positive case. And with the numbers that have come in, we're now over 1,000 tests that we've given to members of our community, and we haven't had any positive cases. We did have one contract employee who contracted the virus while they were away from campus, and that person has not yet returned to campus. But nobody on campus has been diagnosed with COVID. We've been lucky, but we've also made our own luck, right? We're hopeful that our policies and our practices are helping keep us safe. But we also acknowledge that there are schools who are doing much of the same, taking many of the same steps and precautions that we are, who haven't been as fortunate, who have had an explosion of cases, and that's really been disruptive. So we haven't had that. It's my hope that we can make it through the next 4 weeks without that type of disruption. And if our trend continues, we'll be really happy. So that's good news. Next slide. Spirit Week. Now, normally on Fall Family Weekend, I wouldn't necessarily throw in a slide about Spirit Week. We're at the end of Spirit Week now, and it's a week in which people get dressed up, and there's a theme for every day. But this year's a little different, and I think it does bear mentioning. And while I have not yet been able to bring myself to wear pajamas on Pajama Day, this week has shown that our community has not lost its taste for fun and for being silly. And the costumes were great, and the engagement across the community was great. People still are enjoying life at Pomfret School, and many of our traditions remain very much in play and very much at the core of what we're doing. So that's good. Next slide. our Quest program, and you returning parents will know about Quest. Our new parents, Quest is our co-curricular program that complements much of the work that we're doing in the classroom. I've personally been involved in a couple of different Quest sessions with juniors discussing some sort of beefy, meaty issues around identity and around gender issues, and have been really impressed by the work that's happening in there. This past week, I think it was on Wednesday or Thursday, there was another Quest session. And the ninth graders did, and our third formers did an exercise called This I Believe. And they had to spend time thinking of and then writing down 10 things that they believe. And then they discussed those in groups. And then as the sort of the final and culminating part of the activity, they had to choose one of their statements. I believe X, whatever it may be. And they had to take sidewalk chalk and they had to go out and write their statement to make their thinking and their feelings visible to the world. And they did this just before I walked home, and they did it on the sidewalk that goes from my office, the main school building, over toward Freshman Circle, where most of them live. And so a walk that usually takes me maybe 30 to 40 seconds took me about 10 or 15 minutes as I stopped and I read every one of those This I Believe statements. And I was humbled by their thoughtfulness and their passion, their creativity, and their engagement and their willingness to share those amazing statements with us. So, that's good. Next slide. Again, for returning families, this may look somewhat familiar. For new families, maybe not so much. The Wellington Engagement Index is a measurement that we use 6 times a year. We collect data on student engagement, and it focuses on their classes and their afternoon activities. You can see it's a pretty simple XY axis chart, and we measure how much a student really loves or hates their classes or their sport, and how easy or how challenging they find their classes or their sport, right? So in an ideal world, we would like to see that kids love their classes and that they find them challenging. And what you can see in this chart is both last October on the left, you can see the graph that represents last October's engagement, student engagement in their classes and sports. And on the right, 2020's student engagement. And we were, at the beginning of the year, I think we were all a little bit concerned that even with our good preparation and our good training, it was going to be hard to keep students focused and engaged this year, particularly our students who were not with us in the classrooms. And we completed, last Friday was the end of the midterm. And while there are some students, mostly distance learners, who are still in need of scaffolding and ongoing support, the vast majority of our students are doing incredibly well. And importantly, as this chart shows, our students are feeling really very positively engaged in their classes and in their sports, and compares really favorably and even slightly better in some cases to how they were feeling last year when everyone was in person. So I attribute this to some extent to their resourcefulness, their desire and happiness at being back in school and not having to learn full-time at a distance. And we look forward to the day when our distance learners are all back with us, but also to the amazing and exceptional work being done by their teachers and coaches to go the extra mile to overcome the obstacles to learning that are in place this year, but to make those experiences in and out of the classroom really powerful ones. So that's really good that we're doing so well on the Wellington Engagement Index. So in addition to the good things happening in our academic program and our co-curricular program, there have been a lot of other highlights. Senior chapel talks and the accompanying music from students and faculty members of our community have been amazing. Yesterday, for example, 4 seniors gave terrific talks. Two of them spoke about their passion for art and how that's changed them as people. One spoke about his deep appreciation for the value of friendships. He spoke about his roommates and, you know, sort of how each of his roommates at Pomfret have influenced him in really positive ways. And then one senior spoke about her growth through the adversity that she's faced and overcome at Pomfret. And they were wonderful testaments, richly diverse perspectives on the student experience. And they reminded us that even though we're not all in chapel together, we're gathering largely as advisee groups to watch chapel speeches. Those chapel talks remain incredibly powerful and a very central part of our experience at the school. If we could only get them to stop hugging each other after chapel, I would be really happy. That's been a chore. So next slide. Just jumping back for a minute to academics, I'm going to ask the director of the Grauer Institute for Excellence and Innovation in Education, Gwyneth Connell, to spend just a couple of minutes helping you understand what our teaching models have really entailed this year. So I'm going to mute and thank you, Gwyneth.
Sure, thank you. Going into this hybrid model of the fall with most of our students present here on campus, but then a significant number all over the world learning at a distance, I knew that I really wanted to make sure that we could hold on to the things that really make the student experience at Pomfret unique. In particular, our student-centered approach to teaching and learning. We really pride ourselves on designing classroom experiences where the students are doing the work. So as I saw many of our peer schools, doubling down on technological solutions that simply allowed everybody to look at the teacher all the time, I knew that those were things that just wouldn't work across the board for us and the way we do school here. So one of the things that we tried to do was, as we were able to anticipate which classes might have significant numbers of distance learners, we were able to create standalone distance learning sections. So all of the Humanities 1 and Humanities 2 classes are either entirely in person or entirely at a distance. So the teachers who are teaching those distance sections can really craft an experience that's tailored to the distance learners. And by consolidating those students all together, especially for our freshmen who are new, it enables them to create relationships with a cohort of students who are kind of in the same boat as they are. And then their math and world language classes are more likely to be in a hybrid mode. So the hybrid classes are those that have students who are in person and at a distance participating in them. So overall, I would say probably about 40% of the classes that are happening here on the Hilltop are entirely in person and in many ways feel a lot like they would in a normal year. When we're doing group work, we have to remind kids to keep their distance from one another, but teachers have been really creative in figuring out ways to really keep and hang on to the things that are at the heart of the Pomfret experience, even as we make these COVID required modifications. Then another 40% are these hybrid classes. And I think that's where many of our teachers have shown real ingenuity. I think about just things like in Todd Matthews' Homer's Odyssey class, every day, one of his students is assigned to be the note taker, and one of his students is assigned to be the videographer. So he's really engaging the on-campus members of his class in helping to craft the experience for his distance learners who may be, it may be 2 a.m. for them when the class is happening. And so they're not able to be there in real time, but it's their classmates back on campus who are helping to create the experience that they're going to have at a distance. And then the remaining 20% of our classes are these standalone distance sections that are helping to bring that same student-centered pedagogy to those students who are zooming in from all over the world.
Thank you so much, Gwyneth. And I encourage anyone who has further questions about how this is all going to communicate with Gwyneth and Doug McLeod, who's our Director of Studies. So thanks so much. Next slide. College counseling is not immune from the heavy lifting that everyone is doing this year. And everything is different, but college counseling is also particularly different. Students are unable to visit colleges. The paradigm around testing for colleges and universities is shifting and is certainly confusing. And the landscape of college admissions in general it does not look the same as it did 12 months ago. Bruce Willannon, who's the director of college counseling, and his team of Art Horst and Sarah Goronsky have been fantastic in making sure that our students, our seniors in particular at this juncture, are getting the attention and support that they need to navigate uncertain waters and waters that are certainly changing. They've hosted virtually visitors from 47 different colleges and universities, some of the finest colleges and universities in the country. And our Burning Questions series has given students and at times parents direct personal access to top-level deans and directors of admission from more than 15 colleges in 15 really high-class colleges across the country. So in short, our seniors are getting a lot of quality time, touches with their counselors or their college counselors. My understanding from Bruce is that most of the senior class will have submitted at least one early application, that is early decision or early action application by November 15th, which is just about 3 weeks away. And I hope that some of you were able to attend this morning's workshop and learn a little bit more. But again, if you do have questions, Bruce is your guy, and I think he's probably provided you his contact information. Next slide. Athletics, we are indeed playing in a different way this year, and this is one area where things have not played out as well as we might have hoped. Back in August and early September, it was our hope that we would be able to begin interscholastic athletic competitions in early October. And while we knew that was a tenuous proposition, we were hopeful. But unless the conditions in our area change for the better soon, we're facing the possibility that we may have a fall season without any athletic contests. The governor of Connecticut is discouraging non-essential travel even within the state. And with spiking COVID cases around the state, schools are really concerned. I know that one of our peer schools, or two of our peer schools who were scheduled to play each other last Saturday, canceled all of their games. So we continue to work with our student athletes to try to develop skills. Many of you, or most of you perhaps, know of our 4-2 model that has allowed students to pursue multiple interests in the fall. And that's been a real boon. So the way that works is that you can choose a primary activity to do 4 days a week. But then the other 2 days a week, when we have afternoon programming, you can choose to do something completely different. And this has been made possible because the New England Prep School Athletic Conference has relaxed some of their rules regarding out-of-season training. So soccer players, for example, who play hockey in the winter, can 2 days a week, they can train for hockey and play hockey or tennis or whatever it may be. Cross-country runners who do cross country in the fall as a sport can opt to do yoga or ultimate frisbee or crew or yearbook, to name just a few of the options that are available. And they're available because our faculty members have volunteered to offer these extra sessions. And again, my gratitude goes to our coaches for leaning into this new system. The logistics have been complicated, but it's been worth it. So we remain hopeful for a shortened season, and we are certainly evaluating the winter season as we move inside as well. So next slide. As I referenced earlier, the work around diversity, equity, and inclusion is central to our priorities. DEI has long been a priority of mine and the schools, and it certainly was thrust into a new place of importance this summer with the social unrest around racial inequities that spiked around the country and the world this summer. Our mission statement, our community values, our vision of the graduate, and our diversity strategic plan all speak to longstanding and ongoing commitment to diversity work. This year, we've sharpened our DEI focus and have been more intentional in our programming than we've ever been before. We've done more professional development for our faculty and staff. All senior administrators are going through a 30-hour training in something called the SEED program, Seeking Educational Equity and Diversity. And Gwyneth Connell is leading one group, that's the administrative team, and Jillian Forg is leading a group of faculty through that training. Faculty and staff have received anti-bias, anti-racism training that's ongoing. And we've had, as I mentioned, some fantastic programming in our Quest program. We had a new orientation session, the first time we've ever done this for new BIPOC students. Our task force on DEI, which is being chaired by Jillian and TC, has been working hard at addressing the goals that I established and that the school established earlier in the summer in our DEI action plan. And just yesterday, we confirmed that we have now formally engaged with a search firm to help us lead the process to hire a new full-time dean or director of DEI, something that we've been that's been in the works for 2 years. So with my high compliments and praise to Jillian and TC, the work that we're doing around DEI has never been better. Next slide. So yeah, so what else is good? And you can hit that button again, Gary. Our values are good, and you can see, we can see, and parents, you will see our values splashed all over campus when you next come to visit, which again, we hope is soon. These values continue to inform our decision-making and our expectation. You can see in that slide that statement about how we take care of ourselves, each other, and the community in which we live has been a central rallying cry for us this year. We're also talking, next slide, about our mission statement and our strategic plan. These are two processes that were underway last year when COVID entered our lives and said, not right now. And we had to turn our attention to COVID and away from mission and strategic plan. But every year, the Board of Trustees evaluates and affirms the school's mission. And 2 years ago, last year, 2 years ago, they gave sort of a pro forma approval to keep the mission statement and to plow forward. Last year, they decided, or I decided to have them dig a little bit deeper and look at the mission statement. And Gwyneth Connell led them through an exercise. And at the end of that exercise, the board felt unanimously that it was time for us to think differently about the mission, not to change the mission of the school and what we do and who we are, but to change the words that frame that purpose. And so that is a process that is underway. Now, again, after last year, the Board of Trustees and the senior administrative team have been working on the statement again rather extensively this fall. And we hope to have a new statement, at least a proposal for a new statement at the December Board of Trustee meeting. Our last strategic plan, the Pomfret Purpose, was developed in 2012 and published in 2013. And it's been serving us incredibly well for 7 years. And we were again in the middle last year of doing kind of a refresh of that plan. Somewhat miraculously, and maybe just because our 2013 plan was a pretty darn good one, many of our priorities from 2013 remain in place in modified form as we look to the future. And so we are, again, diving back into our strategic plan, looking to the future of the school, where our priorities will lie. And that informs the work that we're doing, certainly in our advancement office, to support initiatives to improve the life and the programming, the existence, the academic experience for our students, co-curricular life for our students. And so that plan, when we finish it, which we hope will be by the end of this year, will give us a new arc that we will be following for the next 5 to 7 years. Next slide. Last year, we implemented, as part of our precautions and certainly financial precautions, we implemented a hiring freeze. But we didn't freeze our hiring altogether. And we are extremely fortunate with the 3 folks you see on that screen that we didn't freeze our hiring. These 3 folks are new and dynamic faculty members who bring both rich diversity and different experiences to our campus. And they join an already amazing group of professionals who, as you know, have been working tirelessly to support and challenge your kids during what can only be called a really difficult time to be a teacher, and maybe even more specifically, a really difficult time to be a teacher at a boarding school. So I hope that in short order, you'll have a chance to meet these new faculty members and to see how they're challenging and supporting your kids. We also have one member of the senior administrative team who is new in a sense to Pomfret, and that's Director of Advancement, Will Mitchell. Will is not completely new to Pomfret, as he graduated in the Pomfret class of 1984. So it's good to have a Griffin alum now heading up the alumni and advancement office. I know Will looks forward to a time when he can meet you in person, and I've actually asked him to share a few words and speak with you for just a few minutes right now. So, Will.
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate the introduction, and I appreciate the chance to talk to the parents and guardians who are joining us this morning. As Tim said, I'm very proud to be an alum of Pomfret. I first arrived in the fall of 1981, and certainly Pomfret and the experience I had here had a deep and profound impact on me and who I am today, and I'm very grateful. And I think only later did I really sort of recognize and appreciate how my experience was shaped by the philanthropy of alumni and parents who preceded me at the school. And so this is a quick opportunity I want to take to thank you for the way that the parents of Pomfret have supported the school and the experience that our students today have, and more specifically to thank our parents for supporting the Pomfret Fund. I hope as parents and guardians you received Tim's letter recently regarding the Pomfret Fund. I just want to speak very briefly to why giving to the Pomfret Fund matters. Certainly when you make a Pomfret Fund gift, you're supporting your child's experience and every child's experience here. Our business model at the school sort of by definition creates a funding gap where tuition only covers about 75% of our budget. So Pomfret's essentially spending $15,000 more per student than tuition would allow us to. And so as part of that, the reality is that the Pomfret Fund is about 12% of our budget. And that means, roughly speaking, about 30 days of the school year only happen because of your support and alumni support of the Pomfret Fund. And I'd also want to add that when you participate in the Pomfret Fund and make a gift, it also sends a really powerful message to our community that those who are closest to us, parents who are seeing that experience through their children's eyes, are really giving us a vote of confidence. And that really matters not only to all of us here at the school, but it also matters in a lot of the conversations that I have with those people who are capable of making some of the largest gifts to the school. Just yesterday, I was speaking with a former parent and trustee who has been extraordinarily generous to Pomfret, most recently making a gift that funds a full scholarship. And he was speaking about how important parent participation is to him, to making, encouraging him as he makes his gifts to Pomfret. So all to say, I really just want to express my gratitude for your consideration in making a Pomfret Fund gift in support of your children and their experiences here. Thank you very much, Tim. Back to you.
All right, thanks so much, Will. In addition to Will joining the senior admin team, we have a few others who are either new to the team or in new roles. So our Dean of Faculty, our new Dean of Faculty is Martha Horst. New Assistant Head of School, former Dean of Academics is Don Gibbs. And as I mentioned earlier, Jillian Forrigan, T.C. Hanmer are our co-directors of DEI this year, and they have fleshed out the senior admin team. I think it's worth noting as well, and you see his picture on the screen, that Doug McLeod, who is the former curriculum coordinator, has taken on the role of Director of Studies this year. Quite a role to be thrust into in this particular year. I want to spend just a minute or two talking about, and I know we're running long here, but talking about the winter calendar. And while, I want to start by saying that we have said all along that we will host students on campus if they can't find an alternative. I think it's worth mentioning that I feel very much that is still an invitation we're offering. But right now, as you look at the calendar, you can see that the period of time from when we go on break in November until when we come back in person is now about 8 weeks. And that during that time, campus is going to be very quiet and it's going to be very lonely. And I want to encourage parents, to the extent that you can find alternative places where your children won't be sort of alone in their dorm room, to try to do that. The school will help to the extent that we can, but it is worth noting that being alone or being one of just a few students on a boarding school campus for 8 weeks in winter can be a real challenge, and certainly if you're a teenager. So we will remain open. We will keep your children safe and fed if they cannot find another location. But we all feel that in their best interest, it would be in their best interest to find a home, and hopefully their home over break. So we will begin classes in January on or around the same date that was originally scheduled, but that first 8 or 9 days will be distance learning. We will delay our return to campus by about 8 or 9 days from what we had originally published back in August, mostly to allow for a post-holiday quiet period that we think is really important as people transition back to school. And then we're reserving the possibility of having quarantining for some select students and those details still need to be worked out, but there may be a few students to whom we would grant quarantining permission, though it won't be the same open opportunity for all students. So you can see on the calendar there, and I will send this all out to you in a letter that will probably go out on Tuesday. You'll be able to digest this a little bit more. But we are sticking with the November 20th or 21st break through the 30th, and distance learning beginning on December 1st through the 16th. And then the break will go from the 17th to January 6th. Distance learning for about a week, and then back in person will begin an onboarding on the weekend of the 16th and 17th. The spring term here you can see looks much like what we would have anticipated had things been normal. We will go on March break maybe a couple of days earlier than we had initially planned, March 3rd. We will onboard students again beginning on March 20th and 21st, and classes will resume on March 22nd. It is not our plan at that time to do a quarantine, though, as I have mentioned, campus will remain open and students will be welcome to stay. That's a much shorter break than the November through mid-January break. So I don't feel quite as strongly that students will have to look for other alternatives. But again, it's always a healthy thing to get a break from a boarding school after the winter term. So here we are reaching the end of my presentation and nearing the end of Family Weekend. And I want to talk about optimism. A few years ago, I delivered a chapel talk here on the perils of cynicism and pessimism. And I still feel, and I've always felt, that there are lots of reasons why people should try to be optimistic, not naively so, but try to find the glass being half full rather than half empty. We know that optimists tend to be both happier and healthier than pessimists, and that's a good starting point. But there are other reasons. And I say that, as I say that, I'm smiling because there were a number of heads of school, and I think I was probably one of them, who felt when we opened school that we were really hoping this was going to work out. But there were a number of heads who were not optimistic that we would make it to October, much less to the end of October. Most school heads sort of had floating around their gut that we were going to give this our best shot, but that we would probably, or likely, if not probably, have to close our doors. And that hasn't happened. We have navigated the complexities of repopulating campus and living in a close-knit, tight community during a pandemic, and we've done it well. Our students are doing well, and we have no reason to believe that trend will end. And so I'm optimistic about that. I'm optimistic that treatments for COVID-19 are improving. Remdesivir was just approved by the FDA. Dexamethasone has shown promising results in the treatment for COVID-19. And so I'm optimistic about that. I believe that vaccines and that monoclonal antibodies are coming, though exactly when they're coming is somewhat uncertain. But I'm really optimistic about the power that vaccines will have to allow us to return to normalcy. I'm optimistic that the flu season may not be as bad as the normal flu season. So often international travel is a great source and exacerbates the flu, and there just hasn't been that much international travel. The fact that we're walking around wearing masks and protecting ourselves from other people's germs every day makes me feel good that maybe we'll have less flu this year. And so I'm optimistic about that. And our students and our faculty are learning that while this is really hard, this is something that we can do. I was a French teacher for a number of years, now a long time ago, and I was a big fan of the French author, novelist, and poet Victor Hugo. And in his seminal novel, which then became a musical, Les Misérables, Hugo wrote, Même la nuit la plus sombre prendra fin et le soleil se lèvera. And for those of you non-French scholars, it translates beautifully and very simply to even the darkest night will end and the sun will rise. I've returned to these words many times in my life for both personal and professional reasons. And I've turned to them time and again this year, and I'm turning to them again now. The dark night will end. This scourge that is COVID-19 and this pandemic will go away and the sun will rise. I have to believe that. And when it does, I believe Pomfret's going to be a better, stronger, and healthier community and school than it's ever been. So I want to thank you for your time, for your attention, and perhaps mostly thank you for trusting us with your amazing kids. We are thrilled to be here. We're thrilled to have them with us, and we look forward to our journey together continuing. So with that, I'm going to close and open it to questions. And Gary, are you going to provide the questions, or should I read those? Something we didn't discuss.
I think it's probably easiest if you take a look at the Q&A and answer what you can.
Okay. So oops, I just lost one.
You lost it, Mr. Richards, because I just answered it in the chat. There was a question about spring and quarantine, and I think the intention of your remarks were to say that perhaps a formalized quarantine program on campus would not be something we would host. And I added in the chat that our onboarding process with a 10-day quiet period and double testing would still be in place.
Oh, that's spot on, Mr. Gibson. Thank you. So there are questions that have been answered in the chat. And the question is whether we want to bring those questions to the full audience, because the full audience can read the responses. So we, again, I apologize for a slight lack of clarity here, but we don't have any unanswered questions at this point.
If you would allow me, Mr. Richards, I'll just try to answer kind of a theme that was in the questions.
Great.
I do think it might be an appropriate conversation point for all attendees. And for those of you who have trusted in Pomfret School and your own circumstances have allowed students to attend in person, we're terrifically grateful for that. And it has really enriched our experience, and I hope you feel the same about your students. A question or two came up in the chat with respect to day students and also the liberties for faculty that may be different than the restrictive practices that are happening for people who are on campus. And I just wanted to say that we've done, I hope, a good job communicating with our day families as well as our boarding families about the need for health and wellness and safety and risk management. And in particular, I wrote in the chat in response to one question that our day families are aware that our quiet period of restricted visiting and travel really has continued for them all year. And so we're so thankful actually to our faculty, to those who commute, to our day families and to our day students for adopting really healthy practices that have helped us as a campus community stay really safe. Our surveillance testing and background sampling, as Mr. Richards mentioned, with over 1,000 tests taken on campus, has yet to uncover a positive result. And that's not because our fingers are crossed and because we're lucky. I think it's because we've been vigilant on campus, and our families and day students and commuting faculty and faculty in general have been great partners who understand in full their responsibility to this campus and to the program that we're trying to offer. So I just thought that would be an important one to share.
I will jump in just on the winter sports and activities because it's an emerging situation. We rely on the guidance from the state of Connecticut as to what is permissible and what is not. And they have specific standards for what is allowed. Right now, you cannot play hockey. Ice rinks in New York, New Hampshire, and now effective yesterday, Massachusetts are closed. They're not closed in Connecticut, and so our hockey teams can still skate. But I'm not sure how long that will continue for. So we are a little bit at the whim and the mercy of the state of Connecticut, the governor, and the standards laid down by both the governor's office and the Department of Health. We don't know and won't know for some time. A lot will have to do when we return on the condition of the state of Connecticut. What are the COVID rates look like? And again, if we are allowed to play, and I genuinely hope that will be the case, we will consult very closely with our potential opponent schools to make sure that their protocols and practices are as safe as ours, or at least fairly consistent with how we are approaching our COVID testing and social physical distancing measures. So I know it's a complex but a very important question for many. It remains central to what we do. Our athletic program is a core part of our experience, and we are hopeful that that's a part of the program that we will be able to continue in the winter. So, okay. And if there's going to be winter sports, the athletes could also play until the end of March. So seasons, certainly athletes could continue to play. The school's on vacation. It will be challenging to continue as a team.
So, Mr. Richards, I think that's a question in response to a query maybe by a few people asking why we've decided to have a spring break rather than compress the school year and just charge ahead. And my quick answer was in deference to the social emotional health of our students, that we thought that was not a prudent approach, but perhaps you'd like to talk about that.
I would like to expand just for a minute, because we spent a great deal of time exploring different options for the second half of the year. And while it doesn't really matter, most of our peer schools are doing the same thing that we are, that they're coming back for a winter term and then going on spring break and then trying to establish some degree of normalcy for the spring term. There are exceptions. There are schools that are going hybrid from early December, and then continuing in hybrid mode right up through February, and then coming back for the rest of the school year, beginning at the end of February. Those schools will not have athletic seasons in the winter. You can't do it if you're in distance mode. The calculus that we did was that we're looking at two real choices. One would be to come back at some point, end of January, or at some point in February, and then just go straight till the end of the year without a vacation. The second model is the more traditional model, where you come back for winter and then you take a spring break and then you come back for spring. And there's a risk in having a third major reentry point at the end of another vacation. And that's a real risk, and one that we acknowledge. It's also one that we feel like we can control pretty well. We demonstrated that we could control it pretty well in September. We believe that the reentry in January will be, we hope will be just as fluid, and that by the time the March reentry period comes around, we will be professionals at this, and that we'll have another good and safe reentry. When we considered the other model of going potentially for 4 straight months without a vacation, we really paused. I was on a conference call, a webinar with Dr. Sten Vermund, who is the dean of the Yale School of Medicine. And he was speaking to a group of boarding school heads of school, Connecticut boarding schools. And he was explaining the Yale University decision to come back in late January and then to go straight through until graduation without a vacation, saying that they would take periodic days off, short little breaks. And I raised my hand and with real deference and respect to Dr. Vermund said, that model works really well if you're a college or a university where professors are maybe teaching 2 or 3 days a week. But our faculty are teaching 5 or 6 days a week, and they're working 7 days a week. And to go from the middle of January or end of January, or even the middle of February until May without a break, I told Dr. Ramon, I said, I would suggest, I would posit that wouldn't be a very healthy approach for either faculty or students. And he agreed. He said, yeah, this model does not work as well for boarding schools. And I would encourage you to take a break. And so when he said that, that certainly tilted our thinking and certainly confirmed our calculus that the mental health and the social emotional well-being of all community members, not just your children, but faculty as well, needed to be our top priority. And that was best handled, best addressed if we had a spring vacation. So sorry for the long-winded answer, but it's an important question. How many students are now on campus versus online? The exact numbers, Mr. Jenkins, are you there? Can you give an exact number?
Yeah, hey everybody. I was actually just typing it in there while you were talking. We have roughly about 70 students online currently and 280 in person, but that doesn't mean that they're staying overnight on campus since we have about 60 day students. So if we were to pull that number, we're about 220 living on campus, and it fluctuates as students sometimes transition into distance learning or out of distance learning in that hybrid mode. But roughly about 220 living in the dorms, 280 in our classes and in our sports.
All right, I'm not seeing any other questions. The good news here is that this isn't the last time you can ask us questions. And I hope you'll find that if you do have questions or queries, concerns, that you'll share them. You know how to get, or I hope you know how to get in touch with me. You can email me directly, trichards@pomfretschool.org. You've received emails from my head of school account. You can do that. My phone number is on the website. I invite your calls, and I know I speak for all members of the team who is on this call. We stand ready to take any of your questions, hear your concerns. We know that there isn't a perfect manual for doing this, and that we're, as just to borrow now a tired phrase, we're building the plane as we're flying it. And the more input we have, good suggestions, and even constructive criticisms that we have, make us better at what we're doing. So I want to, again, applaud you. I want to thank you for spending some time with us this morning. I want to encourage you to continue to keep your questions and comments coming toward us. And I appreciate you trusting that we're going to take good care of your kids. So normally I would be closing this and then heading over to the dining hall to join you all for lunch. I'm sorry that's not happening. I'm looking forward to the day when that will happen. But in the meantime, I hope you are all staying healthy, you're staying well, you're staying safe. And again, thank you so much.